Alright, today we're going to compare the Fujifilm X-T5 with the f23mm f2 lens with the Fujifilm X100vi, everybody. Some of you guys were requesting this video and people were asking me whether or not they should get the X100vi or the X-T5, because with the X-T5 and the f23mm f2, it's essentially a versatile X100vi, am I right? But this is where this comparison video comes into play, and stick around to the end of the video and I'm going to share with you which camera I would pick if I could only pick one to start with. Let's go. These two cameras both have the same sensors, both sporting the 40 megapixel X-Trans sensor. The X100vi is the third camera to get this 40 megapixel sensor. But what's different is that the Fujifilm X100vi is a fixed lens, meaning that you can't remove the lens. You are actually stuck with a 23mm f2 focal length. But if you're bored, you can always add some accessories to get different focal lengths. You can get the WCL, which is the wide conversion lens, which will give you a focal length of 18 millimeters or a full frame equivalent of 28 millimeters, or you can get PLC converter, and that is a teleconverter, and that's going to make your lens into a 35 millimeter lens. Full frame equivalent is around 50 millimeters. However, these do come at an additional $350 each. So this will also make your X100vi bulkier, defeating its purpose of being a small, stealthy camera. Speaking of stealthy, the Fujifilm X100vi is smaller than the X-T5. And in order to make something so compact and sleek, there are things that I feel Fujifilm compromised in order to get such a pretty looking camera. And that is the X100vi's ergonomics. I would love the hand grip to be bigger. Like the groove right here ain't cutting it. So that's why I recommend you guys getting yourself a thumb grip or a hand grip for the Fujifilm X100vi. And it's going to help tremendously. I have the thumb grip and the hand grip by Small Rig, and I am loving how it feels. It feels so much better to hold in the hands, and it's much more comfortable. But by doing so, you're adding more bulk, and that could ruin the sleek camera aesthetic that it has going for itself. Right out of the box, I much prefer how the X-T5 feels in my hand than the X100vi. The Fujifilm X-T5 also has a few more buttons and dials than the X100vi. It also has a directional D-pad as well, so this just gives you a few more buttons for your custom functions. So basically, you get to use it to program more things and get access to certain things quicker than just menu diving. The Fujifilm X-T5 has a 3-way tilt screen, whereas the X100vi can only flip out one way. I'll say this, the first time I opened the Fujifilm X100vi, I didn't realize that this screen can come out because they made it so flat that I thought it was just stuck there. But the thing about the X100vi is it doesn't flip out like the X-T5. You can't flip it out and use it in portrait orientation like you can with the X-T5. The Fujifilm X100vi has a 2-way tilt LCD screen, whereas the X-T5 has a 3-way tilt LCD screen. The X100vi also has an advanced hybrid viewfinder, so you can switch between the EVF showing what the sensor sees and the OVF, which also shows the outside of the frame, and the OVF image display option allows you to view an image after it has been made either at full screen or in the corner of the viewfinder. So it's an optical viewfinder, and it just makes it so you have a more analog experience. The Fujifilm X-T5 only has an EVF, so that's kind of boring. The X100vi is also sporting the old square battery that I'm not a fan of, because all my batteries have been transitioned into the new battery you can find in the X-T4, the X-T5, XH2S, XH2, the XS20. I would have loved to use some of the spares that I got laying around with those batteries, but instead the X100vi opted for the old square batteries, which I think has poor battery life and performance when I used to shoot it on the X-T3. However, saying that, for some reason the battery life on the Fujifilm X100vi took me by surprise. It's actually quite good. I was using this for several hours, taking over like 1,000 shots, and never once did I feel the need to switch. Your mileage may vary once you start to introduce 6.2K and 4K video recording into the mix, but for strictly photography, I've been more than satisfied with the battery life. The Fujifilm X-T5 has the new batteries. It holds more juice for better battery performance. The X-T5 also has dual SD card slots, whereas the X100vi has one, so this can be a deal breaker for some of you guys out there. The X-T5 is also weather resistant, and the X100vi is almost weather resistant. In order to get the full weather resistant, one must buy a filter adapter for your lens, and that filter ensures that your lens can be resistant to the weather, and that's going to come at an additional cost as well. The X100vi has a 4-stop ND filter built into the lens. It also helps deliver a wide aperture in bright conditions to separate the subject from the background, or extends the shutter speeds to emphasize movement. Again, this is something something unique only to the X100 series camera. The XT5 can't do that. It doesn't have a built-in ND filter at all. The focus ring has a cool crisscross pattern, and I like how grippy it is. And the aperture ring has these tabs to help you adjust the aperture. But I can see this focusing ring and the aperture ring being a problem for people with bigger hands and have those sausage fingers, because this thing is kind of small, and unfortunately I have small hands and fingers, so I'm able to use it without problems. I would love it if it was a little bit bigger, but I get it. This camera is all about form over functionality. Everything they do is to keep this camera small and sleek. I get it, guys. Don't come after me. I swear to God. The X-T5 is already weather resistant without any additional cost. It is also an interchangeable lens camera, so that could prove to be more versatile. And as mentioned earlier, the Fujifilm X100vi is a fixed lens, so you are stuck with this lens. You won't be able to remove it or change it to a different lens, so that could be quite the commitment for some of you guys. Both of these cameras have IBIS, but the X-T5 has 7-stop of IBIS, whereas the X100vi has 6-stop. I haven't noticed a difference in real life application. Both are really good. In my opinion, both of these cameras look great. The Fujifilm X-T5 is more comfortable to hold out of the box, but with a couple of accessories from SmallRig, the X100vi can get there as well. But man, without the accessories, the Fujifilm X100vi does look really good, and it looks a bit better than the X-T5 in my opinion. Something about this camera aesthetic just looks really pretty. So let's move on to the image quality. So since both of these cameras have the same sensor inside, that 40 megapixel sensor, essentially they're going to have the same image quality. But what I would like to share with you guys is if the X100vi's lens performs better than the XF23mm f2 with the X-T5. The Fujifilm X100vi is a difficult camera to get your hands on. I know some people told me they're looking at June to get theirs, even though they pre-ordered near the end of February. For the people who cannot wait that long and want to get a similar image quality to the X100vi, with the X-T5 and the XF23mm f2 be good enough? Is there a difference in sharpness quality? Let's find out in this Pikachu testing. Right off the bat, at this distance, I find that the X-T5 and the XF23mm f2 to be softer at f2 than the X100vi. The X100vi lens seems to have more sharpness there and a bit more clarity. And you can see around Pikachu's eyes where the clarity is. The X100vi just looks like it just a little bit sharper around these areas with the X-T5 and the XF23mm f2. If you stop it down, you'll see the lenses does sharpen up, but I find that the X100vi suffers from diffractions around f8. This is when I started to notice that the images started to become a bit softer again. And this is the same for the X-T5 and the XF23mm f2 as well. Another thing I found was that the XF23mm f2 with X-T5 has a bit more purple fringing. Obviously, this is for people who likes to zoom in to 200% at regular distance. Without zooming in, I don't think you can find anything different. Both will suffer from flaring when the sun is out, so just be mindful of where you point your camera. I'll take a look at the minimum focusing distance as well. The X100vi can get in much closer than the XF23mm f2, and once you do get close, you can see that the XF23mm does get soft. X100vi seems to be sharper at minimum focusing distance than the X-T5 and the XF23mm f2, which is pretty good for the X100vi. Now, if you want to use the X-T5 with the 23mm f2, just be mindful of the distance. The closer it is to the subject, the more soft looking it might get. Me, personally, what I'm seeing through these testings, I don't think this 23mm lens, XF23mm f2 lens, can resolve the 40 megapixel sensor. The shots that I took with the X-T5 and the 23mm f2, at f2 had this like soft halation smearing look that I've been seeing. I feel like this is one of those common characteristics you would find in lenses that cannot resolve the 40 megapixel sensor. I found this to be true in the XF35mm f1.4 and as well as the XF16mm f1.4 and now the XF23mm f2. Now this could just be my copy, I'm not too sure, so I'm going to need some of you guys to confirm for me to see if this is true for your X-T5 and your XF23mm f2. But I will say this though, the XF23mm f2 lens is still great on the 26 megapixel sensor. I love shooting with that thing on the X-T3. I had a lot of fun using that lens on the X-T3. So my money right now, if you want the slightly better image quality, you're going to need to get the Fujifilm X100vi. Now let's move on to autofocus. So using single point AF for the X100vi, shooting from minimum to infinity, doesn't give you a great result. I would say that this is pretty bad considering that they did put an updated processor inside. It takes a while to focus, and it may take a couple of tries before it settles and acquire that focus. On the other hand, I tried the same test with the XT5 with the XF23mm f2 lens. Same test, minimum to infinity. It was quick and snappy. It was brilliant because of its linear motors inside. And I didn't hear any autofocusing noise coming from that lens. And I also found that the Fujifilm X100 lens, when you're autofocusing, to make quite noise. It has that robotic grinding noise that you find from the XF35mm f1.4. It just makes that focusing noise that's quite distracting. So in this autofocusing with the wife, I told her to just walk down, and I had the AF settings at its default settings, like it came straight out of the box. In my findings, I found the X100 to be much more accurate than the XT5. As you can see in my XT5 and the XF23mm f2 tracking, this is what I was mentioning in my 1-year review with the XT5's autofocusing. It just feels like it's almost there, but almost there isn't good enough. Like the images I got look like they're almost sharp, but not really. Whereas the Fujifilm X100 I find that it was sharp while the wife was walking down. The autofocusing firmware that is on the X100 it is a little bit stickier than before, so I'll give them credit for that incremental improvement. This is only for tracking humans. I shoot a lot of portraits, but if you do like, street photography, static subjects, landscapes, I don't think this pertains to you as much. As technology advances, it's just gonna keep bothering me because I'm seeing these other camera companies advancing with their autofocusing, and I just want the same for Fujifilm. Like, is that so much to ask, Fujifilm? Like, get your shit together, or gonna switch to. So what makes the Fujifilm X100 the better choice? Small, lightweight, it's an aesthetically sexy looking camera, has a OVF for folks that want a more analog experience. It has a 4-stop ND filter and can probably get into more places where the interchangeable lens camera can't. It also has Reala Ace film simulation, which the Fujifilm X-T5 will get soon in a firmware update. The shooting experience is more fun for everyday documentary travel stuff. The Fujifilm X100 lens is sharper than the XF23mm f2 lens. However, you can't find this camera anywhere. There's a lot of people with pre-orders that still hasn't gotten their camera, so that could be an issue. And also, it has one SD card slot. I feel like that could be a deal breaker for someone. But what makes the Fujifilm X-T5 a better choice? The X-T5 is more versatile, can switch out different lenses for a variety of looks, whereas the X100 has a fixed focal length. The X-T5 also has dual memory card slots. It's fully weather sealed right out the box, whereas the X100 needs additional hardware for an additional price. It also has better EVF. It seems like it's easier to view. Unlike the X100 it feels like I'm straining my eyes looking into the viewfinder. The X-T5 also has a directional D-pad and has a better battery, but it's not a point-and-shoot body. The X-T5 plus the F23mm is going to cost you about $2,150, whereas the X100 if you can find them for retail, it's only going to cost you about $1,600. And if I had to choose just one, the X100 or the X-T5, I would honestly choose the X-T5 just for its practicality. That's another thing that we have to talk about, like the supply issue right now. It's ridiculous how many pre-orders this camera has. I thought my camera took long when I pre-ordered it in the end of February. Like I got mine like at the end of March. Some people ordered before me and it's not going to get it until like June. Some people reached out to me and that's what they're telling me, and I'm just like, God damn, I feel so sorry for you guys. So if you can't wait and you want something right now, the X-T5 offers a bit more versatility and it has the similar image quality as the X100 as long as you put on the XF23mm f2 lens on the X-T5. So let me put this back to you guys. Which one would you get, the Fujifilm X100 if you can find one right now, or the Fujifilm X-T5? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, and if you're interested in these cameras or the small rig hand grips, I'll leave links down in the description below, and consider subscribing to my channel for more Fujifilm content. There's more coming your ways, and thanks so much.